Have you ever looked into a woman's eyes as she expressed desire for you, only to be left completely blindsided when her feelings seemingly vanished without explanation? The emotional whiplash you experienced wasn't just bad luck. It was an encounter with one of the most profound psychological mysteries Carl Jung ever uncovered. Today, you're about to discover the shocking truth about female desire that Jung revealed through decades of clinical work. A truth so profound it will permanently alter how you understand every woman you've ever known. This revelation isn't comfortable. It will dismantle your romantic expectations and challenge everything you thought you knew about attraction. But this understanding is precisely what you've been searching for all along. The pain you felt, the confusion, the rejection, the sense that something doesn't add up in your relationships, stems from a fundamental misreading of female desire. You've been interpreting signals through your own psychological framework, missing the deeper archetypal forces at play. Jung's analytical psychology offers you the solution, a map to navigate the complex unconscious landscape where female desire truly originates. By understanding the archetypal foundations of desire, you'll finally see beyond the surface expressions that have left you confused and disappointed. According to Jung, female desire emerges from what he called the great eros, a primordial archetypal energy that transcends simple sexual attraction. This isn't just about physical desire, it's about a profound creative and destructive force that shapes human connection at its core. When you experience a woman's desire, you're encountering something far more complex than mere attraction. You're witnessing the manifestation of libido, psychic energy, being projected outward. This projection doesn't follow logical patterns or rational timelines. It follows archetypal ones. Think about a moment when a woman's interest in you seemed to ignite suddenly and intensely. You likely attributed this to something you did or said, some quality you possessed. But Jung would suggest something far deeper was occurring. You had become the canvas for her unconscious projections. The great eros moves between creativity and destruction in ways that often leave you emotionally disoriented. One day, you're the object of intense desire. The next, you might face unexpected coldness. This isn't capriciousness. It's the fluid nature of archetypal energy seeking expression through conscious experience. The three hidden faces of female desire. Jung's analytical framework reveals that what appears as simple attraction often masks three distinct psychological processes, none of which align with your straightforward understanding of desire. First, there's the search for completeness. When a woman projects desire onto you, she may unconsciously be seeking aspects of herself that remain undeveloped in her own psyche. Jung called this the animus, the masculine element within the female unconscious. Her desire isn't for you specifically, but for what you represent archetypally. You've likely experienced this when a woman seemed intensely drawn to specific qualities you possess, perhaps your confidence, intellect, or creativity. The intensity of her attraction wasn't proportional to the actual attribute, but to her unconscious need to integrate that quality within herself. Second, desire often functions as an escape mechanism from psychological discomfort. When internal tensions become overwhelming, the psyche naturally seeks relief through external projection. Your experience of being suddenly desired, then just as suddenly abandoned, may reflect this process. Remember that time when someone seemed completely enamored with you during a period of transition or crisis in her life? The desire you felt directed toward you wasn't about you. It was her psyche seeking temporary refuge from internal conflict. Third, and perhaps most unsettling, is desire as a shadow projection. Jung emphasized that the shadow contains all the aspects of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. When a woman projects shadow elements onto you through the vehicle of desire, she's unconsciously engaging with disowned parts of herself. This explains those puzzling situations where intense attraction seemed coupled with equally intense ambivalence, or even hostility. You were experiencing the projection of shadow material, becoming both the object of desire and the container for disowned psychological content. The anima-animus dynamic. Your confusion in interpreting female desire stems partly from the fundamental difference in how the masculine and feminine unconscious operate. As a man, you project your anima, your inner feminine, outward, seeking completion through relationship. But you expect the woman to engage in a parallel, symmetrical process. Jung's insight reveals why this expectation leads to disappointment. The feminine unconscious relates to desire through different archetypal patterns. While your anima seeks wholeness through union, her animus often seeks differentiation and self-realization. When you misread her desire as simply the feminine version of your own experience, you miss the unique archetypal dynamics driving her behavior. Her attraction isn't necessarily about seeking union. It might be about confronting aspects of herself through the mirror you provide. Think about relationships where the intensity seemed mismatched. You were seeking connection and intimacy, while she seemed to alternate between closeness and distance. This wasn't emotional inconsistency. It was the natural movement of different archetypal energies seeking different forms of psychological resolution. The collective unconscious and desire. Jung's most revolutionary contribution was his concept of the collective unconscious, a shared psychological substrate containing universal archetypal patterns. Female desire doesn't emerge solely from personal experience, but connects to these ancient, collective patterns. This explains why certain dynamics in relationships feel strangely familiar, almost predestined. You're not just engaging with an individual woman's desire, but with archetypal patterns that have played out countless times throughout human history. Consider how often relationships follow seemingly scripted patterns, regardless of your conscious intentions. The intensity, conflicts, and dissolutions often feel predetermined because, at the archetypal level, they are drawing on collective patterns rather than purely personal choices. The most troubling implication is that much of what you experience as personal desire directed toward you specifically is actually the expression of impersonal archetypal forces seeking manifestation. Her desire may feel uniquely tailored to you while actually following ancient psychological pathways that transcend individual connection. Here's the revelation that Jung's analytical psychology forces you to confront, one that will fundamentally transform how you understand every romantic interaction you've ever had. The woman who expressed desire for you wasn't seeing you at all. She was responding to her own unconscious material projected onto you. The shock of this truth is existentially disturbing. Those moments when you felt most desired, most seen and appreciated, were actually moments when you were being used as a psychological screen for projected content. Think about your most intense romantic experiences, the passionate beginning stages where you felt completely desired and accepted. Jung's framework reveals that this intensity wasn't about you. It was about unconscious archetypal material finding expression through the relationship. This explains the baffling pattern you've encountered, the intensity of desire, followed by inexplicable cooling or sudden shifts in emotional temperature. You weren't witnessing changes in authentic connection, but the natural fluctuation of psychological projection. The profound disappointment you felt when relationships suddenly changed wasn't just emotional pain. It was the collision between your expectation of being truly seen and the reality that you were primarily serving as a canvas for projected unconscious material. This revelation forces you to question every instance where you believed you were desired for yourself. According to Jung, this almost never happens in the early stages of attraction. What you interpreted as personal validation was actually an impersonal archetypal process unfolding through you, rather than toward you. The feelings of confusion, frustration, and even betrayal you've experienced in relationships stem directly from this fundamental misunderstanding. You believed you were engaging with a woman who desired you for who you are, while in reality, you were engaged with her unconscious processes that follow their own internal logic rather than your expectations of consistency. Most devastating of all is the recognition that the emotional connection you thought you shared was largely illusory, a temporary alignment of projections rather than authentic engagement between two whole individuals. The woman you believed desired you was actually in relationship with aspects of herself that you happened to embody or evoke. This explains why so many relationships that begin with intense desire eventually collapse into conflict and disappointment. The initial attraction wasn't based on seeing and appreciating who you really are, but on unconscious needs finding temporary expression through your presence. The patterns of attraction and rejection that have left you confused weren't personal failures or successes. They were the natural movement of archetypal energy, following its own developmental path through the psyche of the woman who seemed to desire you. The shock deepens when you realize this process isn't one-sided. Just as her desire wasn't truly about you, your experience of being desired wasn't truly about her. Your own anima, your inner feminine, was projecting its needs and expectations onto her, creating a double illusion. This mutual projection creates what Jung called the divine couple, an archetypal experience of intense connection that feels transcendent precisely because it's engaging with collective unconscious material rather than the limitations of actual personalities. Remember how, in the early stages of intense attraction, you seemed to understand each other perfectly. How you felt a connection unlike anything you'd experienced before. This wasn't because you truly knew each other, but because you were both engaging with projected content that perfectly matched your unconscious expectations. The devastating truth is that neither of you was relating to the other as a complete human being. You were each relating to projected aspects of your own unconscious. What felt like profound connection was actually profound isolation, disguised as intimacy. This explains why the inevitable disillusionment feels so personally wounding. When her desire shifts or disappears, you experience it as rejection of your true self. But your true self was never the object of desire in the first place. You were loved for who you weren't rather than who you are. The cyclical nature of attraction, idealization, disillusionment, and rejection that characterizes so many relationships isn't a sign of emotional immaturity or incompatibility. It's the natural unfolding of unconscious archetypal processes that were never about the individuals involved, but about the unconscious seeking expression and resolution. Jung's revelation forces you to confront the painful truth that most of what you've experienced as desire, both giving and receiving, has been a complex exchange of projections rather than authentic engagement with another human being. The emotional pain you felt stems not from failed connection, but from the inevitable collapse of illusory connection that was never really established. Jung's revelation about female desire doesn't condemn you to emotional isolation, quite the opposite. It offers you the first real opportunity to create authentic connection beyond the veil of projection and unconscious archetypal influence. Understanding desire as a psychic thermometer, rather than an absolute truth, transforms how you engage with relationships. When you recognize the projection of animus material or shadow content, you're no longer at the mercy of archetypal forces you don't understand. You now have the framework to separate what is unconscious libido from what might become authentic connection. This doesn't mean dismissing desire as meaningless, it means recognizing it as the beginning of a psychological process, rather than its culmination. The path forward requires conscious discernment, the ability to distinguish between projected content and genuine engagement. This discernment isn't about becoming cynical, it's about developing psychological maturity that allows for deeper, more authentic connection. When you encounter female desire directed toward you, you can now ask, what archetypal pattern might be seeking expression here? Am I being seen for who I am, or am I serving as a canvas for unconscious projection? This questioning isn't about rejection, but about creating the conditions for something more genuine to emerge. The revolutionary potential in Jung's insight is that once you understand the projective nature of desire, you can begin the work of withdrawal of projections, the psychological process of reclaiming the unconscious content you've attributed to others. This withdrawal isn't about emotional disconnection, it's about taking responsibility for your own psychological material, rather than expecting others to carry it for you. When both individuals in a relationship engage in this process, something remarkable becomes possible. Seeing each other as you actually are, rather than as carriers of projected content. Consider how different your relationships might be if you could distinguish between the woman before you and the anima projections you've overlaid onto her. Imagine being able to recognize when her desire stems from authentic connection versus unconscious projection. This capacity for psychological discernment doesn't diminish the experience of attraction, it transforms it. Instead of the unconscious rush of projected content seeking expression, you can experience the gradual unfolding of genuine recognition between two individuals who see each other clearly. The ultimate value of Jung's insight is that it frees you from the painful cycle of misinterpreting archetypal projections as personal validation. You no longer need to derive your sense of worth from being the object of desire. a position that Jung revealed as fundamentally unstable and ultimately disappointing. Jung's framework offers more than just a way to understand the deceptive nature of desire. It provides a path towards psychological wholeness that transforms how you engage with relationships entirely. By recognizing and integrating your own anima material, rather than projecting it outward, you become less dependent on external validation through being desired. This integration creates the foundation for what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole and distinct. When you no longer need a woman's desire to complete you psychologically, you can engage with her as a separate and complete individual, rather than as a vehicle for your own unconscious needs. This shift creates the possibility for a relationship based on mutual recognition, rather than mutual projection. The most profound implication is that authentic desire that sees and responds to who you truly are, becomes possible only after the work of projection, withdrawal, and psychological integration. What comes after the disillusionment isn't emptiness, but the possibility of genuine connection. This understanding transforms not just how you receive desire, but how you express it. Are your own feelings of attraction based on seeing the whole person before you? Or are you also engaged in projection of anima material? This self-reflection creates the foundation for mutual growth rather than mutual disappointment. The real gift of Jung's revelation is that it offers you something far more valuable than the temporary high of being desired. It offers the possibility of being truly known. Beyond the projections and archetypal influences lies the potential for authentic connection between two individuals who see each other clearly. This doesn't mean that archetypal material disappears from relationships. The great eros remains a powerful force in human connection, but with consciousness, this force can be channeled into creative relationship rather than unconscious reenactment of ancient patterns. Imagine engaging with a woman's desire not as validation of your worth, but as an opportunity for mutual exploration of the archetypal dimensions that shape human connection. This conscious engagement with the archetypal creates relationship that honors, rather than is imprisoned by unconscious influence. The journey Jung's psychology invites you to undertake isn't easy. It requires confronting the narcissistic wound of recognizing that much of what you've experienced as personal connection has been impersonal projection. It demands the humility to acknowledge that you've been as engaged in projection as those you've blamed for not seeing you clearly. But the reward for this psychological work is beyond measure. The possibility of relationship that doesn't collapse under the weight of projection, but grows through the soil of genuine recognition. The possibility of desire that responds to who you are, rather than what you represent archetypally. How will this change your approach to relationships? What patterns of projection can you now recognize in your past experiences? Share your insights in the comments below. If this revelation has provided clarity about your own relationship patterns, give this video a like and subscribe to continue this journey into the depths of psychological understanding. The path Jung illuminated isn't easy, but it leads toward relationships founded on conscious awareness rather than unconscious projection. And that makes all the difference between temporary intensity and lasting connection. The transformation from being unconsciously desired to being consciously loved is the most profound shift you can make in your relational life. And it begins with the shocking truth Jung revealed about the nature of desire itself.